Waiting. We hear our first scripture from Paul's letter to the church at Rome, the 8th chapter. We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. Not only so, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we eagerly wait for our adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have? But if we hope for what we do not have yet, we wait for it patiently. But if we hope for what we do not have yet, we wait for it patiently. And yet we have trouble with waiting. None of us likes it all that much. Julie just turned from I-494 north onto I-94 east after doing 2 shifts as an ER nurse at the hospital in Rosendale. And as she's traveling down this road, she knows it by heart because it's what she does 3 and 4 times a week. She goes and she works her double shifts in the ER, and then she goes home to her home in Hudson. She knows every tree, every building, every stitch of the way. And she's got it all timed out. She's hit 94. It took her 15 minutes to get to where she needed to be, and now she knows that she's got just about an hour to get home before her boys get home before her boys are done with hockey practice, and she's going to meet them at the school. She's got it down pat. She knows it for a fact. But oh no. Oh no, she looks at the road ahead of her, and all of a sudden those warm red tail lights that she's been watching carefully and thinking about making sure that the tuna noodle casserole was ready for the boys after the thing. She looks down the road, and all of a sudden those dull red lights become stark and red, and all of a sudden her 10 miles over the speed limit is now going down to about 5 miles an hour because everything is backed up. And now for her, everything changes. She was patient. She knew it. She had it all figured out. And she knew that the boys would be done with hockey practice almost to the minute by the time she would get to the school in Hudson. But by the time she got there, she knew it's going to be late already. And how is she going to get those boys home? She can't ask her ex. No, her ex has already accused her of not being very good with time and with able to taking care of those boys the way they should. So she's got to figure something out. At first she just says, well, maybe it's going to be just a little bit. And she pulls out of her pocket that agent of the devil, that cell phone that she has, and she starts preoccupying herself. She knows she's not supposed to be driving and looking at the phone, but she's got to be doing something. Her car is going at about 10 miles an hour, but her body and her mind are still 10 miles over the speed limit. And so she's looking at this phone and she's trying to figure it out, and she's worried because she's not going to make it in time. And the fretting becomes different. The more she thinks about it, the more she is flustered about this whole situation. So it builds up into a certain amount of anger. She finds herself actually arguing with unknown people in the car. Some of them are highway patrolmen, some of them are highway workers, some of them are people who drive like crazy and cause accidents up ahead. She has no idea what it is, but she knows one thing for sure: she doesn't like it because she has to wait. And she hasn't planned for it, and she surely doesn't love it. We have a problem when it comes to waiting. I think I can see some of you out there, and I know some of you are old enough to remember before texting and before emails, and the letters that we used to send with anticipation. We used to get a little upset when the letter that we sent out to talk to somebody and ask them questions doesn't come back within 5 or 6 days. And now we look at our cell phones and we wonder what they're doing. I texted them 2 minutes ago and they haven't responded yet. I even had some of that with Matt here. I sent a couple of texts and I'm going, I wonder if he's upset with me already. We have a problem. We don't like to wait. And yet that is the nature of who we are. We are called in many ways to be people who wait and to watch. We have trouble waiting. But if we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait patiently. Psalm 130. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to my cry for mercy. If you, Lord, kept a record of sins, Lord, who would stand? But with you there is forgiveness, so that we can with reverence serve you. I wait for the Lord, my whole being waits, and in his word I put my hope. I wait for the Lord, more than watchmen wait for the morning, more than watchmen that wait for the morning. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Please, God, this waiting is too much for me. The year was 1956. And Martin Luther King Jr. was in his second year as pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. And that time, it was the height of the bus boycott. And Martin was picked to lead the movement to fight in that bus boycott. It was the time of Rosa Parks and all that you know from history. But things weren't going well. In fact, things were going terribly. And the more that they tried to do, the more that they blocked buses, and when they stood in arm in arm in the streets, the more that they did, the more violence came, and more people were hurt, and some were killed, and the threats became more and more. They were waiting for something to happen, and in that waiting, nothing was seemingly happening other than it's getting worse. And in that, on about this time of the year, on January 27th, 1956, Martin had just turned into bed. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and the phone rang in the hallway. And he got up and he answered the phone, and it was a loud and strong stream of profanity that was directed directly to him. And in the middle of all of that, he was about ready to hang up as just another one of those threats, but the voice got softer and more personal and said, "You know, we don't like what you're doing. And if you're not out of Montgomery in 3 days, we're going to blow up this house of yours, and we're going to blow your brains out," were the words for him. Now, he'd been threatened before with violence and the rest, and he had waded through a lot of stuff, but this one he took personally. Maybe it was because his baby was sleeping in the bedroom right across the hallway from the phone call that he took. He couldn't go back to sleep, so he went into the kitchen and he made coffee, and he sat at the kitchen table and with his head down in his hands, half praying, half crying, and calling out to God, "God, why am I here? Why isn't anything happening? We have put our lives on the line. I've given everything that you've asked me to do. I didn't even want this. I wanted to be a professor. That's what I wanted to be. I don't want to be a pastor in this church anymore. It's too threatening. I've got a baby, and I've got a wife, and I've got a life myself, and I really, really don't want it. I have nothing left to give. I've come to the point where I can't face it alone." And he records that in that moment, in the middle of the night with no lights on in the kitchen, he heard a voice inside of him that said, "Martin, stand up for truth. Stand up for justice. Stand up for righteousness." But then he gave him a promise. In that voice he heard him say, God say to him, "Where there is no way, I will make a way. Where there is no way, I will make a way." In all of your waiting and all of your trying, believe it or not, you are not the star of the story. The star of the story is me. God will make a way where there is no way. The posture of the Christian faith, we would like it to be active. Somehow we've got to figure out how we can fix things. But the posture of the Christian faith is first to wait. Not waiting passively, but waiting with prayer, reflection, watching with anticipation for the gift of the Spirit, waiting for mercy, empowering us to be merciful who desperately need the gift of mercy. We wait with hope. We wait crying out of the depths to God. We cry, "Lord, hear my voice." Please, God, this waiting is too much for me. When we speak of the beginning of the church, where it starts, we often look to the book of Acts. You see, the writer of the book of Acts was also the writer of the Gospel of Luke, and then somehow they sneaked John in the middle of it, Luke, and then John got in there. But really, it's really Luke 1 and Luke 2. And in the book of Acts, we look to that as kind of the beginning of the church, and we look directly to chapter 2 is where we look quite often, because that's where all the action is. That's Pentecost. That's when the tongues of fire came down out of heaven and lighted on top of the heads of the disciples, and they were able to speak in tongues and languages of all of the people that were gathered there. And at the end of chapter 2, they're talking about how thousands of people were baptized and became part of the church on that day. And we look to that as being, the source and the start of the church. And quite often it gets us in trouble when we look at it that way, because we figure that somehow we have to get out there and do it, that somehow we have to be active in it. And if that way we're going to save our churches, that are struggling. We do that quite often. But to be honest with you, that isn't where the church starts. It doesn't start in chapter 2. It starts in chapter 1, which kind of gets jumped over. Paul's letter, the Acts of the Apostles, the first chapter, verses 3 through 5. After his suffering, he presented himself to them and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive. He appeared to them over a period of 40 days and spoke about the kingdom of God. On one occasion, while he was eating with them, he gave them this command: "Do not leave Jerusalem, but wait for the gift my Father has promised, which you have heard me speak about." Wait for the gift my Father has promised. We wait with hope for the gift promised. There's been a lot of people waiting lately, waiting for what the future will bring for them. It's an interesting time to be alive. We wait and see what's down the road for our churches. Are they going to be there in years to come? Is it just going to be us old folks sitting in here, or we will have any room at all for those that will come after us? There are people that are waiting tonight to figure out what their lives will end up being. There are people that are here in this place, in this town, in this country, that are here, and they are wondering what the future will be for them. People who have come from other places, who come with permission and many times without, waiting to see what will happen, waiting of what will happen to their children. There are people that are waiting to see what will happen about their identities and such as well. But the question I have, I think, tonight is one that only we can talk about and one we can only answer, and that is, what are we doing in our waiting? God calls us to wait for the gift my Father has promised. So what is that gift? That gift is the gift of mercy. It is the gift of righteousness. It is the gift of forgiveness. It is the gift of hope. How are we receiving those gifts this night? And how are we waiting as we, in many ways, we can sit back and say, well, this is not really our problem. We came over on the boat from Germany and Ireland and the rest, and we're all pretty settled. But what do we do about the people whose lives are at risk right now? God calls us to stand up for justice, to stand for righteousness. And where it seems to be there is no way, He will find a way for us. The posture of the Christian is first to wait, not passively, but waiting with prayer, reflection, and anticipation for the gift of the Spirit, and waiting for mercy, empowering us to be merciful for those who desperately need to hear that gift of mercy. We wait with hope, and we wait with the hope for the gift promised.